If there is anything at all to be said about Star Wars, is that throughout the eras, there have been a myriad of powerful and formidable entities, both dark side and light, beings embodying the pure meaning of the dark side such as Grandmaster Luke Skywalker, Mace Windu, and Grandmaster Yoda, and beings being the pure embodiments of the dark side such as Abeloth, Tenebrae, Palpatine, and Darth Nihilus. Today we are going to be exploring one of these particular entities, that of Makor, the one being in the Old Republic era that possibly surpassed Emperor Vitiate, even going as far as to imprison Vitiate within the heart of this black hole in the Force. Makor, darkness itself, the Annihilator, the Devourer, Makor, was an ancient dark side entity and a mysterious being that resided in the dark heart on the planet of Voss. Makor was an ancient entity, being born after 6900 BBY, meaning he was born around the time of Sith lords such as Darth Andedu and Tulak Hord, two of the most notable Sith to ever impose their tyrannical regime across the galaxy. Before we proceed with this mysterious unveiling of this ancient entity, I would implore you, many of the starships that enroll themselves with our academies and enlist themselves and explore the knowledge of our archives are yet to subscribe yet. If you wish to enter with our archives and gain even more knowledge than you currently possess and expand your holocrons, then I implore you, my friends, force crush that subscribe button. But now, my friends, let us begin. Makor was a mysterious, enigmatic, and ancient dark side entity that resided in the dark heart on the planet Voss. Created when the Jedi Knight influenced the native Gormak by teaching some of them to use the Force, Makor began to gorge itself upon the suffering and anger that resulted from the Gormak rising up against the Sith invaders, who had attempted to seize the planet and take it into one of their own Sith empire, creating it as the world of a Sith and claiming the system for themselves. It soon spread its corruption and influence into the form of the region known as the Nightmare Lands. With its influential powers and prowess as a Force entity, the Gormak into a waging war, persuading the Gormak to engage in war on the newly created Voss. Makor's powers and influence spread outward, gorging himself on the fear and suffering that all beings felt throughout the war. Aided by various avatars and minions, he embodied his physical forms, very similar to Abeloth in the Fate of the Jedi novel series. When the Gormak King of Jakku entered the Nightmare Lands, Makor granted him the power to see the future as the Voss did, being able to easily perceive the future and all courses of events. Makor proceeded to influence Jakku to build a starship to escape to the stars and a cannon to destroy the Voss in their mountain city, using his dark side influence in order to corrupt and turn this being to the darkness. However, when the Galactic Republic and the reconstituted Sith Empire, led by Sith Emperor Vitiate, began to aid the Voss in their fight against the Gormak, the Voss discovered the existence of this mysterious and enigmatic ancient entity, Makor, and the truth about their species biology. Makor's avatars were destroyed at the hands of outsiders, and he was left without a host until the Sith Emperor, Vitiate, Valkorion, Tenebrae, who had grown paranoid that beings in the galaxy would hope to steal his power, was lured into the trap by the Dark Counselor and Sith Lord Darth Barris. The Emperor of Vitiate was imprisoned in the heart of Makor's domain, unable to escape the black hole of the Force, as he battled the entity for control of his host body. Makor and the Emperor both proved equally matched at the time, and continued to war for many years. The Emperor was freed by his Emperor's wrath, who killed the Sith ruler and released the Emperor's essence after battling Makor. The Emperor's essence then retreated to the home of his reconstituted Sith Empire in fear out of Makor, meaning that even the most powerful of the Sith Lords in history feared this ancient dark side embodiment. Fleeing to one of his cloned bodies, Vitiate embodied the form that would one day be destroyed by the hero of Tython in the climactic end of the Sith Empire. Makor's end came at the hands of the Emperor's mortal enemy and longtime rival, the Jedi Knight known as the Hero of Tython, praised by many including Grandmaster Satele Shan and Darth Maul as the greatest of his age, and prophesied to defeat the Sith Emperor by Lord Scourge, and a Voss commando named Tala Red, the Emperor's servant Lord Fulminus, enlisted the entity's age in releasing a plague of utter madness and insanity across the planet. But the mystic Valendar manipulated events so that both the Hero of Tython and Tala Re were able to confront Fulminus at the heart of Makor's power before the plague could be unleashed upon the planet, and later the galaxy, spreading very similarly to Null in the unknown regions. when Fulminus fell in battle with the Knight. Selmakor's attempts to bribe the Jedi into unimaginable power failed. His attempts to turn the Jedi to the dark side ultimately ended in failure, and the entity was destroyed once and for all when Tyler Rest sacrificed herself to end Selmakor's own. And so ends the life of this mysterious and ancient entity. What an end to this character. However, there is one point of his story I believe that we have to listen to, and that is the Emperor. The Emperor Vitiate, obviously being one of, if not the most formidable Sith Lord and Darkseid user that is excluding Force entities in all of history. This being, very similar to Tenebrae, was a literal virgin in the Force, and yet Tenebrae, despite being in his Vitiate form, arguably the weakest of his forms due to the fact it fell easily in battle to the hero of Tython, was able to contend with this entity, meaning that the later stages of his life, beings like Valkorion, and his final form in Tenebrae, as seen in the Echoes of Oblivion Old Republic game adaptation and MMO, would utterly obliterate this entity as he grew ridiculously powerful. But now, let us peer into the past and see if we can find how, in every account of the Emperor's imprisonment within the black heart of the Force that was Makor. Throughout the Clone Wars and the Cold War, Darth Barriss began to funnel the Emperor information on Makor's powers, tempting the Sith ruler with knowledge of the Darkseid entity's mysterious abilities and power. The Emperor Vitiate, believing that there was no force in the galaxy that potentially could challenge him, was very intrigued by this mysterious entity, claimed by Darth Barriss to be an embodiment of the dark side of the Force itself, and an actual vergence of the Force very similar to himself. Vitiate believed that he would learn knowledge from him, and then instantly defeat him, believing his power as his ultimate arrogance, one that would eventually lead to his final demise. In 3640 BBY, over 3 millennia before the Battle of Yavin, the Emperor finally decided to investigate the Makor on Voss. Arriving on Voss in the guise of a mystic, the Emperor entered the Dark Heart only to find that he was trapped, just as Darth Barriss had intended. His schemes and machinations to overthrow the Emperor had slowly been revealed, while Barriss began preparations to declare himself the voice of the Emperor, and therefore the supreme ruler of the Empire in the Emperor's absence. As we can see in the Old Republic game adaptation, the Emperor was forced to battle Makor for eternity for control of the Voss body he was inhabiting. Weakened by the loss of his avatars, and designing the Emperor's unimaginable godlike powers in the dark side that rivaled and possibly surpassed even his own, the entity prevented him from releasing his spirit by committing suicide, and attempted to suppress the Sith Lord's mind, using his power of dominating wills to his advantage. However, there are few beings in the galaxy who have dominated more wills than Emperor Vitiate, and he was able to resist his psychic advances. Unfortunately for the Emperor, Barriss's apprentice had been appointed the new Emperor's Wrath. Barriss's apprentice as being a rising star in the Sith Empire known as the Acolyte. At the Emperor's request by the agents of his hand, the Emperor was able to communicate his situation to Servant 2, loyal servants whose will and mind was bound to the Emperor's itself, of the hand in a moment of strength, briefly overtaking the entity, and being able to communicate briefly with Servant 2, warning him the Emperor was in danger. The Wrath, whom Barriss had tried to kill at the beginning of his coup attempt, travelled to Voss where he was able to locate the Emperor in the Dark Heart, and after gathering the blessing of oneness and the pendant of bone needed for entrance, the Emperor ordered his Wrath to kill the voice and free his essence, but Makor refused to allow his prized possession, the body of unimaginable power, nigh omnipotence even, this dark side entity, this vergence, this black hole in the Force very similar to Emperor Palpatine, to leave. He attempted to use his final power and seize full control of the voice's body. The Wrath was forced to battle the possessed voice and the dark side phantoms that Makor had conjured using various Sith and dark side techniques, but managed to eventually defeat the entity and drive him out of the voice long enough to slay the Emperor's host, causing Vitiate's consciousness to flee back to the Sith Empire, in order so that way he could never, ever be tempted by Makor again, proving to him that there were even beings in the galaxy that outweighed him, at least in this weakened state. Now, let's explore this dark-side entity's unfathomable power in the Force. An entity formed from the Gormak's first contact with the dark side of the Force itself, as we know forged by the Father of Shadows. Makor lacked a physical form, and therefore he corrupted and twisted the minds of those within his realm, transforming and mutating them into his servants, and spreading veins and tendrils of corruption through the nightmare lands that came to be known as. Makor took the form of a deep pit, engrossed with darkness, seeping dark side energy and purple force ability outwards, and true power of the dark side, very similar to Vitiate. Vitiate, when he was killed, just to remind you, when he was killed, both as his guise as Valkorion, and his guise as Tenebrae, and his guise as Vitiate, or at least a massive explosion of dark side entity, even if he faked his death, and his spirit still allowed to live, which would always preserve, due to the Nethemic ritual. The entity of the being was also able to possess various beings at once and creatures to serve as his avatars and minions, which allowed him to continuously spread his power and influence beyond the Dark Heart and take a more active role in the corruption of the Voss. As being born of the Force itself, and a spawn of the Father of Shadows, the living embodiment of the dark side of the Force, Makor can be considered one of the Father of Shadows' children, as an embodiment of the dark side and a perversion of its most twisted nature. Makor possessed the power to rival that of Darth Vitiate, Darth Nihilus, and Palpatine, at least not when they're at their strongest variations. He possessed immense enough power, enough to match a weakened version of the Sith Emperor in battle of wills and in the Force. Vitiate, of course, had been studying and tutoring himself in dark side techniques for roughly a millennia, a ridiculous time. Being alive for roughly, at this point, many hundreds of years. The Emperor, whose own abilities were beyond that of most beings in existence, not just at the time, but in all of history, surpassing the ancient Sith such as Makor Ragnos, Karnus Mur, and in my mind, surpassing beings such as Darth Sidious, Darth Vader, and Darth Krayt, some of the most powerful Force wielders in all of history. The Emperor was unable to overcome Makor's influence and was instead locked in a stalemate with the entity over control of his body, proving that he was capable of utterly contending with the entity, while not being able to defeat him. The entity could not gain the upper hand, but neither could the Emperor. In battle, Makor could summon a variety of Sith phantoms and dark-side minions, but without a body or avatars, he was largely defenseless, existing just as a black hole of the Force. After the deaths of his avatars, Makor was unable to stop Tala Ra from descending into the heart of his power, and could only range as a Voss commander as she sacrificed herself to destroy him, once and for all, ending his tyrannical dark side presence in the galaxy, plaguing the galaxy with the pure embodiment of the darkness. Well, my friends, what did you think of this video about this ancient corrupt Force entity, birthed from the very dark side itself, that had the ability to contain Emperor Vitiate, the only being in all of galactic history up to that point, who had the capabilities to cage and control the Emperor of the Sith, a being whose Force powers surpassed many, if not all, in galactic history, with the exception of perhaps Dark Empire Darth Sidious and Grandmaster Luke Skywalker. Farewell, my friends. This is where we part ways. If you've learnt anything from today's Holocron, it's that you should never delve into the heart of Voss, or for that matter, never study Makor.